Talk to me, to me. Majestic talks. Come and talk to me. Majestic talks. Come and talk to me, to me.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Majestic Talk Show. I'm your host, Latasha Morgan, certified Christian life coach, certified professional life coach, and board-certified master Christian mental health coach. Today, we're going to be talking about human trafficking. Our guest for tonight is Mr. Bill Woolf. Mr. Woolf, tell everybody hello. Welcome to the show.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Latasha, for having me on tonight.
Thank you for coming. I really do appreciate it. I think that everybody needs to be aware of human trafficking in all its many forms. And so, so that we'll be able to assist and know when it's happening and how to report it and what it looks like. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and ATI.
Absolutely. Well, Latasha, you hit the nail on the head, right? Everyone needs to know, because I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes we encounter it head on and we have no idea what we're looking at. My background, I started my career as a law enforcement officer, and I was a detective working gangs when I encountered my first human trafficking case. But I think one of the most interesting things about the story is that when I first encountered it, I had no idea it was human trafficking. I had to go to the prosecutor's office the next day, kind of share the information that I had found the night before, and I said, do we have a case? Do we have a crime here? The prosecutor said, he's got a great human trafficking case. And I remember looking at my partner, and I said, what the heck is human trafficking? I think it was something that was really a shock to think that it's happening here in the United States. And that one case really opened my eyes to the reality that human trafficking is everywhere. It's all around us. We're just not seeing it. And so I just really appreciate, the opportunity to kind of share a little bit more tonight with your listeners to hopefully open their eyes the same way that my eyes were opened many years ago.
Right.
And you mentioned Anti-Trafficking International. ATI is a nonprofit I founded back in 2013. And back then, I was still working as a detective at the time. And a lot of people don't realize, the majority of those that are exploited, particularly in sex trafficking in the United States, are in their teens. Traffickers are targeting young people. The average age, in fact, is about 14 years old. And as I was working these cases, I remember just case after case, I would come in contact with these young people, and they said, we just didn't know. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know who to talk to. We didn't have the words to describe what was happening to us at the time, and so they didn't know how to get help. And that really inspired me in a way that caused me to create this organization to help implement not just awareness within the community, but also effective education, particularly focused around prevention. Because I realized that as a detective, I could go out and identify a survivor of trafficking night after night after night. but it really wasn't moving the needle. It really wasn't bringing about the change I was hoping it to have. And I recognized that we needed to go upstream, and we needed to try to stop the trafficking before it started.
Right. So tell us exactly, so people would know, what is human trafficking?
Well, let me start with what human trafficking is not. Human trafficking is not what you see in the movies.
Okay.
A lot of times we see, movies like Taken, which are really entertaining, but that's not what human trafficking really looks like. You'll see things on social media. I see this on Facebook and Instagram and things all the time where people are like, oh, watch out for the white work van in the Walmart parking lot. That's not human trafficking. Human trafficking is compelling a person to engage in either commercial sex or forced labor. Historically, we've called commercial sex prostitution, but really what it's about is manipulating people. And traffickers have learned it's much easier to manipulate somebody through mental coercion than it is through physical force. Right. And so we don't see, it's not abductions or kidnappings. It's not, kids going missing and nobody knows where they are. Certainly there are cases like that, but they are a small percentage of what's actually happening. The majority of those that are being trafficked knew their trafficker for several months or even years before the exploitation started. And I think that's really critical to our understanding that these are not strangers kidnapping people off of street corners. Right. But they're boyfriends, they're family members, they're people that are leveraging a trust relationship, that are leveraging that 4-letter L word, love, to manipulate people into exploitation.
Ooh, wow. See, most people don't really know that because we mostly look for the van and stuff, or the tissue in the door and stuff like that, or the money on the ground. But it could be right in front of you. And some people, children are living, some people are living in their home doing it and nobody knows it. Okay.
So, there was a study that came out of Florida several years ago that said 90%. Think about that. 90% of kids that are being trafficked are living at home and sleeping in their own beds and going to school every day, at least during the beginning of their exploitation. These are people that we're interacting with. These are young people we might be going to church with on Sunday. They're young people that might be, in youth programs and other things outside of school that we could be interacting with. The problem is that we're not really trained to identify that. We're not really trained to understand what it is that we're seeing. And oftentimes these young people are just dismissed. Nobody pays attention to them. And it leaves them even more vulnerable to the traffickers.
So what you're really saying, we need to open up our eyes and listen to people and not just think that the child just doesn't know what they're talking about. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how widespread is it? Because a lot of people think, like I know you said worldwide, but a lot of people think that it's not really going on in America. A lot of people think it's in third world countries, and it's really not, because a lot of it do come here in the U.S., or people from the U.S. go to other different countries and do it. So how widespread is it?
So the ILO just came out with estimates worldwide that said there's so another word for human trafficking that we oftentimes hear is modern-day slavery, because it is, enslaving people in a life of exploitation. And so globally, that's the term that's used more commonly than human trafficking. But the ILO just came out with estimates that say there's about 50 million slaves on the face of the planet today. It's more than any time in history. And in the U.S. alone, the United States, according to our Department of State, is one of the top countries for human trafficking. Sex trafficking is a $9.8 billion, with a B, $billion industry, in the U.S. alone. So that's $9.8 billion of illicit money that's moving through the sex trade in the United States every year.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
That is a lot of people.
It is. I mean, wow. That's amazing. Not in a good way amazing, but that's awful. I mean, okay, so who's really doing anything about human trafficking then? Which countries are affected by human trafficking? And who experiences it the most?
Yeah, so really all countries are affected. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that while those that are migrating to a new country can be very vulnerable to trafficking, the majority of victims in the United States or in any country are citizens of their own country. The U.S. Department of State estimates it's somewhere within the 80% mark. So I think it's really important that we think about what's going on in other countries and what's making individuals vulnerable in those countries, but we also have to pay attention to what's happening here at home and what's making young people in particular vulnerable. You know, it does, unfortunately, human trafficking is something that disproportionately impacts communities of color. It's something that disproportionately impacts those that may come from not the same economic situations that you and I may come from, you know? And so it's really important that we understand what the actual risk factors are versus kind of what some of our preconceived notions might be.
Okay. Someone has a question. So what's the deciding factor in trafficking and a voluntary participant?
That's a great question, and that's something that we work a lot to really educate on. So the biggest difference or the biggest factor is what I like to call the free-to-leave standard. It's really thinking about, is the individual that's involved in, say, the commercial sex component, right? Is that individual free to leave? Now, one of the things that's critical about that understanding is we're not talking about physically free to leave, right? Because oftentimes we see images of like chains and handcuffs and restraints when we think of things like human trafficking. But understanding that traffickers use other forms to control their victim. One of the examples stories that I like to share about this is a young lady who was about 21, 22 years old at the time. Brittany was a single mom. She had just had a baby. The father didn't want to be involved in the child's life. And so Brittany was really struggling. Her parents disowned her because she had this child outside of wedlock. And as many of us know, it's very expensive to raise children, and it's very difficult. And so she was complaining about it, right? She was just kind of expressing her feelings and emotions, and she was doing it online through social media. Well, a very savvy trafficker happened to pick up on that. He started communicating with her, and he says, look, I have a lot of sympathy for young ladies that are in your situation. My fiance went through the same thing. And he said, look, I'm very connected with my community, with my town. He said, why don't I pay for a bus ticket for you to come to where I live? And I'll help you. I'll give you free rent. You can stay at my house. We'll care for your child. I'll help you get a job. And you can save your money. In about 3 months, you'll be able to get an apartment, get a car, live on your own, be self-sustaining. That sounded very attractive to Brittany. I mean, she was kind of down on her luck, really didn't have anything to lose at that point. So she said, why not? I'll try it. Brittany gets on a bus, and she goes and meets Michael. He picks her up at the bus station, takes her back to his house. And in the house, you know, everything is clean. There's nice furniture. There's other kids there. Everything seems to be on the up and up. He says, go get a good night's rest. Tomorrow we'll go look for a job. She does just that, comes down the next day, has breakfast. Michael says, leave the baby here. We'll care for him, and we're going to go look for a job. So they go, they get in a car, and Michael drives, and Michael's quite the talker. So he's talking, and eventually they pull up in front of a hotel, and he says, "You're going to go inside, and I'm going to send men up there to have sex with you in exchange for money. You're going to do it over the next 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, I'll pick you up, and I'm going to take the money." She says, "Wait a minute. This is not what I signed up for. I'm really sorry. There was a misunderstanding. Just take me back to my baby, and I'll pay you back for the bus ticket, and we'll be on our way." What do you think Michael said?
No.
He said, "If you ever want to see your baby again, this is what you're going to do."
Wow.
You see, Michael never had to put his hands on Brittany at all.
Mm-hmm.
All he had to do was leverage that. And those of us that are parents, we know, like, we would do anything for our children.
It's true.
And so she had this sense of resignation. She had this sense of, what do I do? She felt a little bit of self-shame, like, I got myself into this situation. I need to get myself out. And so she said, "You know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to get back to my baby, and we're going to get out of here." So she goes into the hotel room, starts engaging in the commercial sex act, doesn't really know what she's doing, brings a lot of attention to herself. The hotel calls local law enforcement, and they respond out. When they respond, nobody's restraining her. There's no chains. There's nobody handcuffing there. There's nobody holding a gun to her head. She's the only one in the room. She's got money. She's got her ID. So the police looked at that situation and said, "Oh, she must be a consenting participant," and subsequently arrested her. Took her to jail. Now guys are going to the room. They're knocking on the door. Nobody's answering. They're calling Michael saying, "Hey, why'd you send me to this room? There's nobody here." Michael thinks that Brittany ran away, but she was really in jail. And I can tell you, to this day, we have no idea where Brittany's baby is.
Oh, man.
This is the reality of trafficking. This is the reality of control that they have, right? And so I share that story just to kind of highlight the ways that traffickers control them. So that free to leave standard is really critical. Is that person free to leave? Was Brittany free to leave in that situation? In her mind, she wasn't, because she had her child to care for, right? And so that's really the differentiation. Did Brittany wake up that morning and say, "I want to have sex in exchange for money"? Am I choosing this as my profession today? And at the moment that I want to stop doing it, am I free to stop doing it? If the answer was yes, then she'd be a consenting participant. If the answer was no, as it was in this case, then she was a victim of human trafficking.
And it made me want to cry. And I don't cry often, but that made me want to cry. Oh my goodness, yeah. So when we're looking at prostitutes and stuff on the street, or just prostitutes in general, we need to be mindful of the fact that we don't know why they're doing it.
That's right. And many of them, estimates suggest, somewhere around 85% of them are currently being trafficked at that moment.
Oh, yeah. And we have always put those people down and said, well, they want to be in it, so that's their problem. Wow, man. Okay. That's awful. I'm sorry, but it's just awful.
Well, one of the, when I first started working this, a lot of my focus was on the gangs that were involved in this. And I worked a particular case where the gang had been exploiting teenagers for 6 years. 6 years. And their method was they would go to an apartment complex, and they would knock on the doors. And if a man opened the door, they would say, "Would you like to buy sex with this young girl?" And if they said no, they moved on to the next apartment. If they said yes, then the transaction occurred. When we went back and started investigating that case, we started looking for how many people called the police to report what was going on. You want to guess what the numbers were?
None.
0, right? Nobody was calling the police. We started talking to people in the neighborhood and said, "Hey, were you aware that there were people going door to door selling girls, selling people?" And they said, "Yeah, we know about it." And so why didn't you call the police? Their answer was, "Well, If that's what they chose to do with their lives, that's their problem. And we've got to be more proactive here. We've got to understand that just because they look like they're 24 years old, just because they look like they have a smile on their face, doesn't mean that they're not a kid who's being forced to do it by a trafficker.
Boy, you just brought that all down. So, then, I guess the question a lot of people probably have, then why isn't anything being done about it?
Well, we are, but we have to change the conversation, right? And I think you really hit on a key piece of that. We have to understand they're not just prostitutes. Oftentimes I'll talk to folks and I'll say, how would you react? I'll go and I'll give a talk somewhere or a training, and I'll say to them, after this talk today, you invite me to lunch or you invite me to dinner, and I say to you, great, I'm going to bring a prostitute with me. Do you think you're going to look at me a little funny?
Yeah.
Right? But if I said to you, can I bring my friend who is a victim of a severe form of sexual exploitation? You'd probably look at that person a little bit differently, right?
Right.
And I think we've got to change the conversation. We have to have the conversation, quite honestly, just to start with. It's not an easy one to have, but we need to be talking to our kids about it. We need to be talking to our coworkers. We need to be talking to those that we attend church with on Sunday. We need to be talking to others about it. And that's a lot of why Anti-Trafficking International exists. To be able to share that information, to be able to put the information that folks need to be able to have those very difficult conversations.
Okay. So what do we need to look for so that we could do something to help? What do we need to look for? How can we spot a trafficker, or can we? What do we need to be aware of?
So traffickers are difficult to spot because just like the victims, they're in our churches, they're in our communities, they're in our civic groups, they're everywhere. Unfortunately, they don't wear a sign that says, hey, I'm a bad person that deserves to be in jail for the rest of my life, right? But what we can look for is those abnormal behaviors. And I think that when we think about those that are being targeted or victimized, those are the ones that we should really be paying attention to. We need to pay attention to things like changes in mood or behavior, changes in physical appearance that may seem like they're depressed or sickly or tired all the time, changes in motivation. Maybe this is a young person that said, I want to grow up to be, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, right? And so you're like, that's great. And then a week, a month later, basically they're just surviving at that point. Those are things that we need to really be looking for. When Anti-Trafficking International was first founded in 2013, we were founded under the name Just Ask Prevention Project. And that original name came from a case that I had worked. There was a young lady, her name was Emily. Emily was 17 years old at the time that we encountered her at a hotel. We got her out of the situation. I remember interviewing her, and as Emily's telling me about her story, I found out that she had been trafficked since the age of 14. For over 3 years, she was being exploited. This entire time, she was living at home with both parents in the home. But her grades started to fall off. And when her grades started to fall off, her parents got angry. They started pointing the finger at her, telling her she needs to do better in school. Counselors at school got involved. Administration at school got involved. Her behavior continued to deteriorate. She started falling asleep in class. Then she started not showing up to class. So a truancy officer got involved. The juvenile court system got involved. Anger management counselors got involved. And I remember sitting there and I said, Emily, how is it possible for 3 years you were surrounded by professionals and nobody ever identified you as a victim of human trafficking? It's one of those moments that is really kind of seared into my memory. And I remember her looking me square in the eye and she said, because nobody ever asked. If somebody would have just asked, I would have told them. But everyone was too busy pointing their finger at me, saying what I was doing wrong, that I needed to get my grades up, I needed to improve my behavior. And I didn't know how to describe what was happening to me. So I was just resigned to be exploited in hopes that one day somebody would rescue me. This story is all too common in this space. And so one of the things that we can do is we can first educate ourselves on what human trafficking is. We can know what some of the warning signs are, and that information is available at ATI's website. And then we need to be able to have those very hard conversations and look for those warning signs and be willing to engage. Another thing we can do is really advocate for implementation of prevention curriculum. ATI has created one of the most comprehensive prevention curriculum in the country, being able to provide youth with the ability to self-identify, with the ability to understand how to get help when they need it. And that's really critical. And we're very proud at ATI that we just announced about a month ago the release of our faith-based prevention curriculum for faith communities. Because it's critically important that we have these conversations in the faith community as well.
Yes. Yes. That's good. I got to check that out. So is there a website or a hotline? Let me do this other question first. Carolyn Jones-Tillman has a question. For the Britneys out there that break free from the trafficker but have to go back to the same environment, are they offered help, programs, shelters, or anything of that nature?
There are some incredible organizations that are providing aftercare and restorative services for those that have experienced trafficking. I'm really proud. One of the groups that I partner with is a group called the Safe House Project that does incredible work to ensure that survivors of human trafficking have equitable access to care that's held to the highest standards. Because these are individuals that have experienced an incredible amount of distress, an incredible amount of trauma and exploitation, and they deserve the very best to be supported on that path to restoration and healing.
Okay. So is there a hotline or a website for victims or citizens who notice suspicious behavior?
So there is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Mm-hmm. That number is 1-888-3737-888. That number again, 1-888-3737-888. And that number is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Individuals can call and report suspicious activity to the hotline if they believe that trafficking might be occurring in their community. They just want more resources. They need education. But survivors of trafficking can also connect there as well to find where some of these aftercare facilities and other services are.
Okay. So how can people get involved with your company in helping, volunteering, or whatever they can to assist in stopping human trafficking?
Well, on behalf of Anti-Trafficking International and many of our partner organizations around the country, we are always looking for volunteers to help carry that message. At ATI in particular, we have a program called the Community Ambassador Program. This is where individuals come and learn and become experts in their own right on human trafficking, and then ATI equips them to go back out into the community to share that message, to spread awareness. Because it truly is with awareness that we are able to save lives. I know we're kind of running short on time, and there's so many other stories I would want to share, but one in particular is a woman who is now part of our team. And she came to one of our community awareness programs. She realized by hearing our talk that her daughter was being groomed into trafficking. She came up to us. She talked to us afterwards. We were able to advise her, support her through that process. And I'm so proud to say that her daughter was never actually trafficked. Her mom was able to intervene early on because she heard that talk. She got the education. So awareness truly does save lives through prevention.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Woolf, for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. Tell people how they can get in touch with you. We're at ATI on Twitter, Facebook, social media. So
our website is www.preventhtt.org. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at PreventHT. So please reach out. We're happy to share resources, and if anyone wants to get involved, we will take you.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show again. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And this information is necessary for everybody to learn and understand. Again, like I said, I really do appreciate you being on the show. And everyone, thank you so much for watching the show tonight. I hope you learned something, and I hope that it'll help you out sometime. Maybe hearing Mr. Woolf will help you see what's going on around you. Thank you so much again for watching. Have a great night. This is Latasha Morgan, and we'll see you next time on the Majestic Talk Show.
Talk to me, to me. Majestic talks. Come and talk to me. Majestic talks. Come and talk to me, to me.